Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio record as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm out for a walk as a break between work sessions. Today I am going to be talking a little bit. I was looking through some recent episodes and trying to figure out what I might want to do for this one, and I realized it's been longer than I intended. I was going to do one of these like once every 10 or 15 episodes, and we're like 30 now since I did a look back. For those of you who don't remember this segment, basically this goes to something I do every year, which is I sort of pick out my top 10 or top 5 games from a year ago and talk about why they're my top 5. And I've been doing this since I started the podcast, but I started the podcast about 5 years ago, which means that before that, I wasn't doing a top 5, at least not for a podcast audience. So what I've been doing is I started this thing called a look back, where I look back at a previous year and I do a top 5 for that year of the games I've played. So the last one I did was for 2016. You can find the link in the show notes. And so now I'm going to be doing 2015. So my methodology here, I went to Board Game Geek and I do an advanced search, and I search all the games made in 2015 or published in 2015. Then I sort them by Board Game Geek rank. So the highest rank game is at the top of the list. And then I scroll down and I record every game in the Board Game Geek top 10,000 ranked games that I've played. I make that list. Then I go through that list and I winnow it down to a few games I want to talk about with you here on the podcast. Now, the other thing that I do as part of that ordering is I exempt a couple games from the list. So one of the rules is if the game is in my top 50, I do not talk about it as part of the top games. I'll mention it, but basically sometimes when I do this, if I'm going to make a top 5 or even a top 10 list, most of the games on it are already in my top 50. That happened more recently than this one, but even in 2016, 5 of the games that I was most interested in, I've already said they're in my top 50 of all time. So it's not surprising they would be at the top of the list. That's true today as well. So I'm not going to talk about these games. You can find my discussion of them in a variety of places, but here they are. We've got Tricarion, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization, and Matainai. Those 4 games are games I'm still playing regularly. They're still games I love, and they would be my top 4 choices for 2015. So that means I have 11 more choices in my top 15 from 2015 that I want to share with you today. I had a pretty strong and long list of games that I played from 2015, and a big chunk of those are games I'm pretty fond of. So I have quite a bit to talk about with you today after those 15, but we'll just bop through it. I'm probably going to talk about a game more right now if it's one I don't recall talking about recently on the podcast. If it's a game I've talked about recently, then I won't talk about it much. I'll just say, you remember that game. And generally what I do in the show notes at rattleboxgames.com, I tag every episode. You can go to the show notes and you'll find each game that I talked about tagged in the show notes. And if you click that link, it'll take you to a list of all the episodes where I've talked about that game. Okay. So the next game almost should have ended up in the exempted from top 50, because up until the last time I did a top 50, this game was in my top 50, and this is Elysium. Elysium is a card game from Matt Dunstan and Brett Gilbert. It's got a really interesting card selection mechanism and really interesting gameplay. It's still pretty novel. There aren't a lot of other games I've played that do what it does, but it's really good. The downside is it can be pretty slow because all the cards have different stuff on them. You kind of have to read them all. And so whenever the new cards come out, everybody has to sit and read for a bit. So that's the downside, but pretty neat. That's Elysium. My number 6 game is Time Stories. This is still near the top of my list. I still say this game is great. Some people thought that the later chapters weren't as good, and I'll admit they weren't quite as good as the first couple chapters, but they were still really good. It was still a great experience. Now, part of this might just be that I had an excellent Time Stories group, and so when we played Time Stories, we had a great time with it. So that makes it, I may be biased, but I love that game. So, Time Stories. Number 7 is a classic board gamers party game, and this is Codenames. Codenames is still a game that I play regularly with my students, with other gamers. It makes its way onto the table quite often with good reason. So, Codenames, yeah, it is a puzzle game, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it. My number 8 game is Mysterium. Mysterium is a kind of supernatural clue-solving game, good for spooky season, so maybe we'll play it during the spooky season this upcoming couple months. In the game, one player is a ghost trying to give clues to a bunch of paranormal investigators who are trying to solve the ghost's murder. It's a fun idea, and it's fun to play. So I recommend, if you haven't had a chance, Mysterium. Next up, we've got Isle of Skye. This is the first one I'm going to talk about with any kind of depth. Well, none of these will be tons of depth, but so Isle of Skye is an Alexander Pfister game. In fact, it might have been the first one I played. I really like it. It is a filler level game with an auction mechanism pricing mechanism that I think is really neat. So in the game, you get 3 tiles and you have to price them. And then the way you price them is by putting money in front of them or onto them to say how much you want to charge for them. Then your opponents can choose to buy the tile from you for the amount that you've designated for that tile. So if they want the tile, they can buy it for you from that price. If they don't want the tile, then you pay the price that you put on that tile for that tile. So it's a really interesting balancing act that because you might have a tile that you think somebody else wants, so you want to price it high, but if you price it too high, then you're stuck buying it and you might not actually want it. I like this mechanism a lot. It's really neat. When you then you place the tiles in your display, and there are a variety of different scoring mechanisms that you're using. I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago in the context of Nemalia, the game from the new game from I think Allplay. Isle of Skye has a really interesting scoring pattern as well. There are a series of 5 different scoring objectives, and each round a different combination of those will score. And you can see from the beginning what that scoring order is going to be. So you can decide which ones you want to concentrate on if you want to. It's not entirely dissimilar from Cartographers, if you're familiar with that one, but I think it's a little better. That's Isle of Skye. The next game is The Bloody Inn. This is a game I haven't played too many times, but I think is a really neat game, and the art is incredible. In The Bloody Inn, you are a murderous family of hoteliers who are murdering and robbing some of your customers and just, providing good customer service to others. You're bribing your way through the town to keep the law off of your back or to get help with your work. And you have to find places to bury corpses, which is, I think, a funny element of the game. It is a really dark theme, obviously, but a fun little Euro with multi-use cards and tough decisions throughout. That's The Bloody Inn. Next up on the list is perhaps the most tenuous introduction, in part because I've just played it the once. So rating it this high above all the other games I've played from 2015 is maybe bold, but it was a dang good game, and I'm really glad to have played it and looking forward to playing again. This is Argent the Consortium. Argent the Consortium is a very volatile, in-your-face worker placement game in which you're placing workers to try to win influence with different leaders of the school so that you can get elected chancellor. Your workers are all little wizards, and they each have a different kind of power, and so when you place them, then they're all going to attack each other before the worker placement spots resolve. And that makes for some really interesting player maneuvering during the game. You also have these cards that will let you amplify different things that you can do. And the different locations that you're going to have different things that they give you. And there are something like 10 different possible things that the leaders might be looking for, but only 5 of them are in play in any given game. And so, or maybe there's 15 and there's 8 in play. I don't remember exactly, but it's a really interesting back and forth as you're trying to figure out which things that you could be doing will get you influence with the leaders. So definitely exciting game. I really want to play it again. That's Argent the Consortium. Bring Out Your Dead is a game I've played a lot. I haven't played it a ton in the last couple years, but it's a really good one. In this game, you are you work in a graveyard or you're trying to bury your family who have all died in the plague. You're trying to get them the best spots in the graveyard. There's a little bit of pushing your luck where you're bringing out corpses when other people are, and if the grave digger's cart gets full, then your family's bodies just get dumped in the river. There are points for different jewels that you can get and points for different spaces that you can take. It's goofy and fun and has tiny little coffins as one of the components, so well worth a check out. If you get a chance, bring out your dead. Next up is Potion Explosion. This is a game I really enjoy playing. I like the physical manipulation of the board. I like the puzzle that emerges as you're playing. Yeah, I think this one's a really fun one. It's pretty light, but really fun to play, and I'm glad I have a copy. Potion Explosion. It's sort of like, if you're not familiar with that one, it's sort of like Bejeweled, one of those sliding puzzles, or one of the puzzles where you're match 3. It's like a match 3 puzzle as a board game. Next up, Prodigals Club. This is a Vladimir Suchy game. It's the sequel to Last Will and can apparently be played with Last Will. I keep saying I'm going to do it. I haven't found the time yet, but at some point, someday, I'll play both of the games together and it will be glorious. In Prodigals Club, you are the scion of a wealthy family, but you don't want to be. And so you're trying to throw away all the good stuff you have. You're trying to go broke. You're trying to not get married. You're trying to not get elected to parliament. You're trying to destroy your reputation, not get elected to parliament, and go broke. You can play with any 2 of those 3, but I think the game is really fun with all 3, which is how I've played. And finally, Dead Man's Draw. This was a tough one, picking the 15th game in this list. Dead Man's Draw is a great push your luck game where you're flipping cards and then using the cards to do things. It's got just enough grit in the actions that you take when you're doing things that it feels meaningful, but it is also pretty light and easy to teach. So if you're playing with new people or playing with people who haven't played this kind of game before, it's a really simple one to get into and a lot of fun. That's Dead Man's Draw. All right, so I have 3 more lists. I'm going to buzz through these real quick as we're wrapping up here, but I wanted to share these with you. 5 favorites from 2015, 5 games I really like that I don't own. Stronghold 2nd Edition is a great 2-player, massive dueling game. I owned it for a long time. I only played it twice, and one of my good friends has it, and he's the one I played it with both times, so I got rid of my copy, figuring I can probably play with him. Now, he might have gotten rid of his copy too, in which case then we're out of luck, but so be it. Another 2-player dueling game that I really like is Raptor. In Raptor, one player plays scientists trying to capture some velociraptors, and the other player plays a velociraptor and her 5 babies. It is a great, I don't know what you call it, read your opponent's mind game. You're trying to figure out what card they're going to play. They're trying to figure out what card you're going to play. And the benefit that comes out comes from the interchange between those 2 cards. Really good. It ended up falling to the I need more shelf space and I just don't play this very often game column. The other 3 are games that I have never owned, but I've played a few times and I like. Ashes: Rise of the Phoenixborn is a great 2-player or multiplayer card dueling game with a neat dice system. I really like that and would enjoy playing it more. Blood Rage is, of course, the Eric Lane masterpiece. I had for a little while, I had Midgard, which is the earlier version of that. And Blood Rage it's a really interesting game, very fun. I'm not good at it, and so it's never crossed my transom. I think if I came across a cheap copy, $20 or less, I would probably buy it because it's a really good game. And I do enjoy playing it occasionally. I'm just not good at it. But that's Blood Rage. And then finally, The Gallerist. The Gallerist is a game I like. I didn't like it. It's on the bottom half of my Vital Lacerda games that I've played. I don't really like the theme very much, but from a mechanisms perspective, it is everything you would expect from a Vital Lacerda game. So really happy to try it when I got to, and definitely put it on my games I like. 5 favorites I don't own. I identified 3 games from 2015 that I would really like to try. I'm sure there were more, but especially in the first say 300 games on Board Game Geek, I identified a few of them like, oh, that's a game I'd like to try. And those are Kingdom Death Monster, Food Chain Magnate, and Forbidden Stars. Now, Forbidden Stars is a game I'll probably never get to play because it is out of print. So if you didn't buy it when it came out, you're not going to get to buy it. And Food Chain Magnate, frankly, sounds too mean for me to have it be a game I want to play regularly, but it would be a game I'd be interested in playing once or twice, because I've heard it's so good, and I feel like I ought to have played it. And then I'm not going to elaborate on them, but there are a few honorable mentions games from 2015 I do like that I was not able to include on this list for a variety of reasons, but I did want to mention them at least. And they are Favor of the Pharaoh, Castellion, Broom Service, Fury of Dracula, Between Two Cities, Shakespeare, Mission Red Planet, Big Book of Madness, and Epic PvP. Any one of those games could have on a different day made my top 15 for the year. And are all games that I enjoy, and all of those are games that I still own as well. So very happy to play any of those if I get a chance. Well, thanks for joining me on my look back to 2015. What games would you say are the top games for you of 2015? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts there. I hope that you had a pleasant walk, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. My number 11 game is probably oh my gosh. Somehow my entire neighborhood is just full of beeps and bloops and engines and, man.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.